Welcome to In the Zone. We'll catch you up on the latest in the NFL, NBA, NHL, and more. In the Zone starts now. Joining Owen Russell and Travis Schuster, I'm Zach Humphreys. We obviously have to get to the Super Bowl. Travis, you have an explanation for why the Eagles couldn't pull it off. What led to the Chiefs' halftime and then the second half comeback?
Well, the main thing for the Eagles was the defense in the second half. The fact that our defensive line had no pressure on Patrick Mahomes in the second half was really the game changer in this game. Because we saw in the first half, okay, the Eagles, their defense wasn't really that great, but it was better than it was in the second half. And when you look at it, okay, you look at a player like TJ Edwards towards the end of the first half, we all saw Edwards tackle Mahomes, grab him by the ankles, pull him down, and then he limped off the field. And we all figured, okay, Mahomes' ankle has got to be hurt. So my question is, okay, if we knew Mahomes has a bad ankle, why wouldn't Jonathan Gannon in the second half just dial up his defense and just put the pressure on Mahomes, just start hitting him? You know, utilize your players like Hassan Reddick and Brandon Graham, because that's what the Eagles are strong at. They had 78 sacks this season. They were third in the NFL of all time in sacks this season. So that's where they lost. Jonathan Gannon dropped the ball on this one. And it's really a shame because our defense was the number one pass rushing defense going in, and we did not see that.
Well, at the end of the day, I really think that you can only coordinate so much of the game. And at the end of the day, the Eagles' defense just didn't show up in the second half. You had Bradbury losing his assignments half the time, I noticed. You had the end in play, the flag at the end. Debatable, somewhat, yes, but I think it was a flag myself. But at the end of the day, it really was the Eagles' defense and just a lack of effort at the end of the game.
It was both ends of the defense. Our defensive line, we didn't put any pressure on Patrick Mahomes. Right. I only remember like one play where he got chased out of the pocket by Hassan Reddick. Reddick didn't touch him, but it did force Mahomes to throw the ball away.
Did you notice how they let the same play happen twice to Travis Kelce and then Sky Moore to get the touchdowns in?
Yeah.
Completely unguarded.
But completely unguarded. And you want to talk about the secondary, everyone in the secondary is like playing 3 or 5 yards back of the receiver or Travis Kelce. I've never seen receivers as wide open as they were.
Me neither. It's just.
And I watched one play. It was Avonte Maddox on the play. Okay, they snapped the ball. The receiver blows right past Maddox, and Avonte Maddox just stands there and points at the guy. I'm like, well, go after that guy. Don't just stand and point. But you want to talk about the Super Bowl? Okay, it's their defense, but it came down to 4 key plays that really cemented the fate for the Eagles. Okay, it was the most obvious one, the James Bradbury holding call. Now, even though I'm a Philly fan, I will agree it was holding, but it was a bad call.
Absolutely. I don't think you call that in the situation. No. I think that it was too trivial at that moment to really make that game-changing decision. You know what I'm saying? Especially
when you let a helmet-to-helmet contact go in the first quarter, which is pretty blatantly obvious. Mm-hmm. Now, I did notice in that game earlier that Juju was held on a similar play. It was a third down. I believe it was like a 3rd and 9 or something. 3rd and 8.
Yeah.
And that went uncalled. That was more obvious than this little tug of the jersey.
Honestly, I noticed that the refs were a little bit off on their calling the entire night. I mean, they had the challenges, for one. I really didn't agree with the Devontae Smith overturned catch. I didn't agree with the call that Dallas Goedert caught that ball. I thought he was out of bounds. I didn't really agree with the end call on Bradbury. It was just, and in a year where referee in the NFL has come under scrutiny, especially with some questionable calls at the end of the game, I think that it's a problem that the NFL needs to address this offseason.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Roger Goodell can sit there and lie all he wants. He says, the officiating's never been better. Okay, but just to run it real quick. He had the Kadarius Toney 65 yards punt return.
Oh, my God.
That
insane.
Should not be allowed. Quez Watkins dropping a pass on 2nd and 9 inside the 10-yard line. That drive ultimately led to a field goal, which would have been a touchdown if we go inside the 10-yard line. You know Jalen Hurts is going to punch that ball in eventually.
Oh, my God, absolutely.
And
he did it 3 times.
Yeah, and then the Jalen Hurts fumble. that scoop and score for Nick Bolton.
I tell you, I was watching that game with my friends. I saw that. I screamed, "No! What are you doing?" And then he runs it back, and it just took the entire energy out of the room.
If at the very least, if one of those plays don't happen, the Eagles could come on top because every play led to didn't lead to a touchdown, except to Quez Watkins led to a field goal for the Eagles. The 3 other plays, led to points for Kansas City, and Kansas City's going to do enough scoring on their own, and the Eagles handed them 14 points.
At the end of the day, it's just an entire game you got to play, and the Eagles fans are obviously going to blame the refs, blame Bradbury, blame Juju Smith-Schuster.
I blame Bradbury only because he said it in the press conference afterwards. He knew it was holding. If you know it's holding, why are you doing it?
Well,
And I mean, even with that being said, personally, I think the Eagles played really well, especially for falling short of the ultimate goal of winning the Super Bowl. I mean, Philadelphia Eagles shocked the entire league with how they played all season long. Unfortunately for Eagles fans, they continue to lose as both offensive and defensive coordinators have decided to leave Philadelphia chasing after head coaching jobs. Shane Steichen has joined the Colts in Indianapolis, and Jonathan Gannon will travel down to the desert to take on the challenge of coaching the Arizona Cardinals. Owen, what does this mean for Philly now?
Well, on the offensive side of the ball, Zach, it means that the Eagles have lost the main orchestrator of Jalen Hurts. When I think of this deal with Indianapolis, I think the Colts had 2 words in mind: Jalen Hurts. You see what he did for him in Philadelphia. He turned him from a second-round pick, not really expected to be a starter, into an MVP candidate this season. Led them to the Super Bowl. And I think that really indicates that the Colts are going to draft young this year. I think they're going to draft a quarterback. Whether they trade with the Bears or the Texans to try to get Bryce Young or not, or they stay in number 4, they have options. I really do think that this is a good move for the Indianapolis Colts. I think that they are going to see some improvement this year, and I think that overall it was just the right call.
Absolutely. I think that's actually a really good call with Shane Steichen bringing in a young quarterback to help build that offense and take it into Indianapolis. And Travis, what do you have to say about the Jonathan Gannon signing? Do you think that's a good signing for Arizona? How much of a challenge does he have?
It's a good sign for Eagles fans because our prayers were answered because I've been wanting Gannon gone since the end of last season because our defense was so abysmal last season. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I believe this Eagles defense was good in spite of Jonathan Gannon. Because, okay, we give him a great defensive line, but he doesn't know how to use it. Right. And to have, not to bring it back to Super Bowl, but, 0 defensive adjustments in the Super Bowl. But Gannon all season really is not a defensive coordinator known for dialing up the blitz, for increasing quarterback pressure. I want to touch on the Shane Steichen situation real quick for the Eagles. You say he's like the lead developer in Jalen Hurts. Mm-hmm. You can make the argument it's either him or it's Brian Johnson, the Eagles quarterbacks coach, who I believe is now a favorite to win that job.
Yes, I did see that.
But I don't think Shane Steichen goes to the Colts if there's not a guarantee of a young quarterback to develop, which would be off par for what the Colts usually do.
Honestly, I have heard some rumors about the Colts going after Derek Carr this offseason. I don't think that's
I think those rumors just started up because that's just a Colt thing to do. They went after Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan.
Well, I do want to shift it back a little bit to Coach Gannon because on the other hand, you have Indianapolis with what I think is a solid hire. And then you go down to the desert and you have a questionable defensive coordinator who didn't make the adjustments in the Super Bowl. Now, do I think that the Eagles defense did a lot better this season? Absolutely. They had C.J. Gardner-Johnson join that team. They had a few other pieces come in, bolster the secondary and defensive line. But I really don't think that Jonathan Gannon is going to be able to manage that offense.
I was reading an article, they talked about, this defense has been great in the secondary. I'm like, okay, we can talk about the coach all we want, but Howie Roseman this season actually went out and got decent cornerbacks. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, James Bradbury, and Darius Slay. I don't think the coach had nothing to do with them. And okay, it astonishes me. Okay, we lose the Super Bowl, but yet we lose both our offensive coordinator and our defensive coordinator. Chiefs win the Super Bowl, but Eric Bieniemy doesn't have a head coaching job, and Steve Spagnuolo is still at the Colts. Like, how does that happen?
And I mean, hey, we could talk about this all we want, but there was actually some movement down in Baltimore, Maryland, as we take a look from the desert to the East Coast, where at the moment Baltimore does have their quarterback in Lamar Jackson, but they also made a recent signing with the new offensive coordinator, the former Georgia Bulldogs offensive coordinator, Todd Monken. He's going to take his talents to Charm City. And Travis, do you think this is a good signing by Baltimore?
I believe it's a great signing because Todd Monken, okay, he led Georgia to back-to-back championships. And their Georgia offense averaged over 500 yards a game with over 40 points per game. That's pretty good. And the icing on the cake is he has a lot of NFL experience. He was the OC in Tampa Bay in 2018, and the Buccaneers were the best passing game offense that season. Then he was with the Browns in 2019, where Baker Mayfield had the best.
One of his best seasons.
Yeah, had his career season with the Browns. Yeah. And one thing Lamar Jackson needs to work on is his passing game. And this is something that Todd Monken seems to know really well because everywhere he goes, the passing game for that offense just seems to skyrocket.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. If we can see a Lamar Jackson-led Ravens team with Todd Monken doing what he did for Georgia against TCU 16 times a year, 17 times a year, that's some football I would want to watch. Now, I'm not really a college football guy. I haven't seen a lot of Georgia or overall what they've done over the regular season, but I know that they are a powerhouse to rival Alabama. And I do think that this is a good hire for them. It really comes down to me whether Lamar Jackson stays with Baltimore or not. I know they can franchise tag him for at least 2 years, I think it is. But at the end of the day, is he going to want to be there with Todd Monken as that offensive coordinator? It looks good right now for him, in my opinion.
I don't think it's going to matter as much. It's going to come down to whoever team can provide the most money for him, I believe. But he's going to need to work on his passing game because he took a step backwards this season. You look at his passing yards numbers. Last season, he had put up over 2,800 yards. This season, 2,200 yards. He took like 600 yards less in the same amount of games. He needs to improve his passing game. However, I believe the contract talks with the amount of money involved, I think it's going to be a lot more of a stronger argument to see where he ends up.
Absolutely.
And I mean, even during the hire to get Todd Monken, Lamar's influence was actually very strong. So with those NFL free agency talks, I mean, I think that's a good sign for all of us Baltimore fans, including different talks surrounding the new free agent himself coming out of Las Vegas Raiders, the quarterback Derek Carr, after a tough season behind Josh McDaniels and now having no restrictions surrounding his free agency. Owen, where is Derek Carr going to play next year?
I am so glad you asked me, Zach. I think that there are very few options that he could go to. I'd say there are 5 or 6 viable options in my mind at this point. I think the most logical one is the New York Jets. They have the money. They are looking for a franchise quarterback, a veteran franchise quarterback. They saw what happened with Zach Wilson trying to build up that quarterback. They don't want to do that anymore. I think that with the major problem in New York being a quarterback, I think that he would immediately upgrade the position and make them contenders. Now, another name that's been going around is the New Orleans Saints, and I think that also would be a very good signing. Dennis Allen and Derek Carr have history. Dennis Allen was the first coach that Derek Carr had in the NFL. I think that they have a great relationship. I think that the Saints are a very viable option. Other than that, a surprise team, the Buccaneers, could also be in play with Brady's retirement. They're not going to be relying on Kyle Trask next year, I don't think. Could be a possibility. And other than that, I think that there's one surprise team that could be in play, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. I think that Geno Smith is a very good quarterback, don't get me wrong, but is he a franchise quarterback? I don't know about that. I think that if they were to get him on a 2 or 3 year deal, maybe, he would be pairing up Derek Carr with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, immediately make an NFC West contender out of those guys.
I think the Jets kind of fit all of it because they have the money, number one, and like you said with Zach Wilson, they don't want to go through that again. But they also have a young offense. You got Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. I think it makes a lot of sense because you can go there, you can potentially make it to the playoffs. I'm not sure how far the Jets will make it, but it'd be a lot farther than like the Raiders have made it. You know, all the seasons Derek Carr has been there.
And one of the things about Derek Carr, real quick, is that he's a leader. He's been a consistent voice in that Vegas locker room. He's got the respect of the guys. If he goes to a young team like Seattle or New York, he's going to immediately establish himself, I feel, and he is going to make the changes that are necessary in that locker room, on and off the field. It could be beneficial for everybody.
Without a doubt, and the best part is these talks are only just beginning, so we have so much more to get into. But for right now, the NHL season is in full swing. We'll have an update on the latest in hockey after this short break. In the Zone, we'll be right back. Taking our attention over to the ice, where the New York Rangers continue their impressive winning streak, winning 6 of their last 7, including 5 straight, coming off of a 6-goal offensive showing against the division-leading Carolina Hurricanes. Owen, how long will the Rangers keep this up for?
I honestly think that they can keep it up for a little bit, especially with their newest trade acquisition, Vladimir Tarasenko. He already had his first goal a few nights ago for them. It's looking pretty good. He was a powerhouse on the Blues. I think that with a Rangers team like the one they have this year, it's definitely a good combination right there. They have the longest win streak currently in the NHL, the Rangers, with 5 games going back before the All-Star break. And they are pulling closer to both the division leaders, the Hurricanes and the Devils. I believe it was the Hurricanes beat them 6-2. Artemi Panarin had 4 goals in that game. 4 goals. Do you believe that? If they can keep getting that production, I think that the Rangers can definitely top their division and can definitely go into the playoffs swinging.
Now, one thing to note is the Rangers do have a Western road trip coming up. So they're going to be in Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, and then Winnipeg. So they have a Western road trip. And it's hard for teams to keep a win streak going, especially when you're flying out west, and then you got to do the trio of all the Western teams.
Well, you have to look at the standings right now in the Pacific or Western Conference. I'm sorry, I forget which one.
For the Metropolitan?
Metropolitan, my bad, yeah. So in the West, you have the Flames and the Canucks. They're in the middle of the road. They're fighting for a playoff spot in the first place. The Oilers are okay. They're not as bad. But I definitely think they can sustain the momentum if they apply themselves to it.
And I mean, with that being said, we are going to actually focus on the West Coast, where the Pacific Division remains a nail-biter. The top 4 teams are all within 1 point from each other, with the Las Vegas Golden Knights holding on to that top spot, with the Kings, Kraken, and Oilers not far on the horizon. Travis, do you see a shakeup coming?
Well, since the script was written, there's been a few more games. So the top 4 teams are now separated by 3 points. But the shakeup's going to be I don't think it's going to be like a shakeup, like a massive shakeup. It's just going to determine what teams squeak in. And I believe we could see 5 teams in Pacific Division make the playoffs. Because right now, okay, Vegas, they're in a playoff spot. They're going to stay in 1. The Kings are going to stay in 1. The Seattle Kraken, shockingly, are going to stay in 1. It's shocking how well they're playing, especially who their head coach is, Dave Haxtell. The Oilers are in 1, and then the Flames are 5 points out of 3rd place. But they're tied for a wild card spot with the Minnesota Wild for the final wild card spot of the Western Conference. And depending on how it goes, we could see 5 Pacific Division teams in. I believe we're going to see 4 because I believe who's in the other wild card spot? The Oilers are in the first wild card spot. I believe they're going to stay in there. So,
for the Pacific Division specifically, I think that in my opinion, it's 2 teams that are in that race. It's the Vegas Golden Knights and it's the Los Angeles Kings. I really think that the Kings have the upper hand, to be honest with you. They've been playing insanely good since the All-Star break. Adrian Kempe alone has been playing lights out. 3 straight games with a goal, 4 goals against Pittsburgh the other night. It would absolutely help them to trade for somebody, I feel. Maybe like a second defender, left-hand defender they can get on there. Other than that, I think that the Knights, they can also make a playoff push, but the injuries have slowed them down. I think that if they can get healthy for the playoff push, they'll be in a good position.
And both these teams have vast amounts of playoff experience as well, which is going to help them, really go far. I don't think it's a lock to say I don't think it's a lock right now to say who's going to win the division, but it's a lock to say that at the very least 4 teams are going to make it to the playoffs.
Absolutely.
And I mean, speaking of the trades, the NHL trade deadline coming up in March, there are some big NHL names that are already being moved, with the Vancouver Canucks trading for Bo Harvard to the New York Islanders and the St. Louis Blues trading for Vladimir Tarasenko to the New York Rangers. Owen, what other big names do we expect to change jerseys?
Well, one name that I was really looking at is Timo Meier on the San Jose Sharks. He's been going through the rumor mill right now. I think that there are a few options for him. The one that makes the most sense for me is the Devils. They've been calling about him. They have shown a lot of interest. I think that if they add him to the team, that the Devils can definitely advance in that Metropolitan Division, and they can probably take the crown, I feel. Other than that, I think a surprise team could be the Maple Leafs that are in play for him. They do need wing help, and I think that a talent like Timo, who is as young as he is, and on a team that has no assets like the Sharks, I think that it would be beneficial for him.
I think Timo Meyer situation is kind of interesting because he is a restricted free agent, which means he has to sign a contract extension with that team, even though he is 1 year away technically for becoming unrestricted. But the Sharks are going to want a lot for him because he's having the best season on record so far. 55 games with 31 goals already. And like you said, I believe the Devils are in a perfect situation because they have a lot of young prospects. They have a lot of draft picks. We see the Devils always end up somehow in the top 10 for the NHL draft, and they should. And they should have a lot of prospects to trade. But the Sharks are going to want. I read somewhere they're going to want like a 3-piece set, either first-round picks, a prospect, and a veteran forward for him, which I believe, like you said, the Devils, the Flames maybe. Could go after him, and the Hurricanes trying to build up that playoff run finally to go somewhere.
The Hurricanes would be unfair, let's be honest here.
But teams would need to clear about like $9 million in cap space to sign him. And that's a lot of money for NHL.
And I mean, with that, the winter sports season is coming to a close, but the spring sports season is just beginning. It's a busy time for Marauder Athletics, and Stephen Armstrong will break it all down right after this short break. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, Marauders. I'm Stephen Armstrong, and I've got a full recap from this past weekend in Ville sports. Women's basketball kept their winning streak going at East Stroudsburg after defeating them on the road 59-43. This advances them to 16-9 overall and third place in the PSAC East. Taylor Langen leads the Marauders with 23 points and 5 steals, and Marin Miller with 10 points. With 3 games left in the season, they will be facing the number 1 seed Shippensburg on February 15th. Men's basketball had a close game against East Stroudsburg, losing by a score of 75-65. A turnover-filled opening half jeopardized and ended Ville's 9-game winning streak after there were 7 turnovers and the Warriors raced to a 12-0 lead. They will next be playing Shippensburg on February 15th. On February 11th, baseball had 2 wins against Chowan University. In the first game, the Marauders trailed 2-0 until Cole Hauser started their comeback with a 1-out double. The threat at Chowan ended after Nate Young caught a flyout in the bottom of the 7th. In the second game, the Marauders had a record-setting score of 23-1. It took no time for them to advance, leading with 4 runs in the bottom of the first. Brendan Taylor and John Seibert set career highs with 5 hits. They can next be seen on the road to play 3 games against Felician, Assumption, and Malloy in Morehead City, North Carolina on February 16th to 18th. Good luck to all Marauders competing as we round out the winter season.
Welcome back to In the Zone. Now joining us is Dylan Shields as competition in the NBA starts to heat up. This past Tuesday, the game of the night was in Milwaukee. Drew Holiday led the Bucks to the win in overtime over Boston, 131-125. Following the win, the Bucks are just half a game behind the Celtics for the number 1 seed in the East. Owen, your thoughts, man?
Well, first of all, incredible game. I want to give a major shout out to Mr. Sam Hauser, sophomore season out of Marquette. He hit that game-tying 3 with 5 seconds left in the fourth quarter to send it to overtime. Couldn't get the win done though, but hey, you got a memory now. But as for the game itself and the teams involved, I think that this was more of a testament to the Celtics as a team more than it is for the Bucks. Because the Bucks in this game were pretty much completely healthy. They have Giannis, they got Drew Holiday, they have Chris Middleton, and they still can't manage to make it out of that game when they against the team that doesn't have Jason Tatum, that doesn't have Marcus Smart. I think that it's disappointing for Milwaukee more than anything. But that doesn't take away from the win. And one more thing that I want to say about the Celtics is to see Derek White and what he's done this season overall is incredible. Coming in for the injuries, he's got that starting point guard job now. He's scored 27 points, had 12 assists in this game. I think that it's definitely been great to see that emergence.
I think you're absolutely right. No Tatum, no Smart, and they still take the Bucks to the limit. Pretty impressive. And I think we're looking at a future Eastern Conference Finals matchup. No disrespect to the 76ers, but I think these two are by far the 2 best teams in the NBA. I mean, their depth is ridiculous in Boston. For God's sakes, Malcolm Brogdon, of all people, off the bench, 26 points, 4 assists. Derek White, 27 points. Muscala, 18 points. I mean, they are loaded. I know, it's crazy. So if they aren't the favorites to win it after This game, I don't know how. And the Bucks, I mean, you got to give them credit. And Drew Holiday, I'd like to apologize for what I said last week. You are an all-star. I mean, 40 points, 8 of 12 from the three-point line. When you outshine Giannis, who had 36, I think you played pretty impressive. But I think the difference is the Bucks lead on the three guys, Holiday, Giannis, and Middleton, to win games, while the Celtics got depth all around.
Real quick, I really think that if both of these teams were completely healthy and they met up in a 7-game series, I think Boston would definitely beat them 5 games.
Without a doubt, with how Tatum has been playing, and he wasn't even there for that game, I mean, that's without going. And I mean, now we're just going to shift our attention over to the Pacific Division when they faced off on Tuesday night. Despite not having Kevin Durant, the Phoenix Suns were able to fend off a feisty Sacramento Kings team. Durant will be out through the All-Star break, but that didn't slow down Phoenix. The Suns ended up winning 120-109 in this one. Owen, is this year Phoenix's year?
Well, if this isn't the year, honestly, I will be surprised because this might be the best Phoenix Suns team I have ever seen in my life. Now, to be fair, the Suns have been pretty bad most of my life, but I think this might be a better team than the one that went to the finals a few years ago against the Bucks. I mean, you still have Devin Booker, you still have Chris Paul, you still have DeAndre Ayton, and now you're adding Kevin Durant, a generational talent, one of the best players of our generation. I think it's a disappointment if they don't win the Western Conference, and I really think that it would be disappointing if they don't win the NBA Finals.
It almost felt like last night in that game, since KD's presence was there, it felt like they were fired up. Like, we want to show KD that this was the right move of you to make to go to this team. And they showed it. I mean, for God's sakes, Chris Paul, 19 assists. He had 17 points. He had more assists than points. That is crazy. Right. And I feel like KD will be perfect for that team because Paul is one of the best of all time at dishing the ball. And you also got Booker, who had 32 points, 13 to 20 shooting. And DeAndre Ayton stepped up, 29 points and 11 rebounds. So I just think overall, I think Phoenix has the best shot of taking down a team like the Nuggets. And honestly, I think that's what it's going to come down to in the Western Conference Finals as well. I think they're the team that can make a surprise run out of nowhere. And with a kind of a weaker Western Conference, I think it has to be their year, right?
Right. Just a quick note, real quick. I think that it's important to note that this wasn't a bad team that the Suns were playing.
No.
This is the Sacramento Kings, who have 2 All-Stars in De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. I think that if they can do that against this kind of team, the sky's the limit for them when it comes to the playoffs.
Absolutely. And also, could we just acknowledge De'Aaron Fox? Sorry. He needs to be in the All-Star game.
Absolutely.
Why is he not in the All-Star game? He is the ship that runs that team, and I just don't understand how they snub him.
And I mean, speaking of when you mentioned beating the big teams, I mean, if in college basketball, it was upset city. I mean, on Tuesday night, starting in the Big 12, Oklahoma took down top 15 ranked Kansas State 79-65. The Wildcats have now lost 2 straight games. Dylan, do you have any concerns for this team in the future?
Well, this makes my prediction last week of them winning the Big 12 look pretty bad. I mean, 2 in a row to not very good teams. But, I mean, college basketball teams usually go through slumps like this, so I still believe in Kansas State. They got 2 big games coming up at home against Iowa State and Baylor, both ranked at home if they want to prove themselves. And they got Johnson, Noel, and Tomlin, their 3-star players. I think they should still be a threat. There's been teams like Kansas, Texas, and Iowa State. They've had some rough losses as well. Kansas lost to Baylor, Texas lost to Texas Tech, and Iowa State just recently lost to Oklahoma State at home. So I think we shouldn't panic yet for Kansas State. I think they got a good shot to win the Big 12, but it definitely is a concern, and the Big 12 is very unpredictable this year.
One thing that I have noticed was that Oklahoma is 3-10 in conference play this year. I think this was just a falter on Kansas State's part. I don't think it's really going to be indicative of the rest of their season. I think they still have pretty high March outlooks.
Absolutely, and I mean, if we were to take a look at different scores from Tuesday night, Dylan, were there any scores that kind of stuck out to you?
Well, there was one big game Tuesday night here. It was number 24 Providence beating number 18 Creighton. They won 94-86 in double overtime. Providence just lost to St. John's on Saturday, and Creighton's white hot. They were one of the hottest teams in the Big East. And the fact that Providence beat them, it kind of caught me off guard there. And the Big East is another conference, just like the Big 12, that is another dogfight. No one really stands apart. in that conference at all. So I just can't wait to see how that finishes out. And another game that it wasn't so much the game itself, but this is personally my team right here, Pitt. They beat Boston College 77-58. But I want to know how the hell Pitt's not ranked. They are the best team in the ACC right now. They're number 1, 12-3, 19-7 overall. They've won 6 in a row. They beat Virginia back when they were ranked number 11, and they beat North Carolina twice. And yes, I guess it's because they had rough starts to the year. They lost to Michigan and West Virginia. But my team, Pitt's clicking at the right time, and they deserve to be ranked. And one final game, it wasn't on Tuesday, but Sunday, number 1 Purdue lost again. They lost to Northwestern 64-58. And this is why I don't trust Purdue to make the run in the NCAA tournament.
Well, that'll actually do it for this week's edition of In the Zone. For Dylan Shields, Owen Russell, Travis Schuster, and Stephen Armstrong, I'm Zach Humphreys. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you back next week right here on In the Zone.